a long time since I felt this inspired to write a review like this. To put this into perspective, I wanted to write this review in October of 2019, but as of writing this review, it's January the following year, and February by the time it comes out. Maybe March, depending on how long it takes me to actually edit this video. Everyone else has talked to death about this, and if you're here, you're probably looking at this as just another rehash of something you heard from someone else somewhere. But this was just at the back of my mind as something that I wanted to review for a bit. And now that I actually have the time to do so and don't have other projects that are restricted to a specific deadline, let's talk about VivziePop. VivziePop, also known on Twitter as Vivine Medrano, I hope I pronounced that right, is an artist and animator who, I could be incorrect, but seems to have gotten popular from a fan-animated music video of Kesha's 2012 hit, Die Young. It's hard to tell exactly when people online get popular when you don't follow them that close, but that's the impression that I got from the channel. Regardless, as much as I'm not entirely familiar with her work, I do remember reading a webcomic she used to do called Zoophobia, and I really enjoyed that. Shame it never did finish, though. Regardless, hearing that she was working on an animated show called Hazbin Hotel was rather interesting. But I first heard about it in 2016. I actually forgot about this project entirely until I heard about its release about 3 years after I was initially told about it. But of course, I sat down and watched it, and... oh! Wait. What is this? What do you mean Vivzie released a second pilot? So I'm actually kind of glad that I waited on this review, because seeing this second, smaller show pop up after the big one allows me to also talk about it. So, Helluva Boss is a thing. I can't say I dislike it, but spoiler alert, I definitely do have more major issues with it than Vivzie's much bigger scale project. The show is about this company ran by 4 people, 3 demons and a furry, who are all effectively hitmen from hell, and honestly, the idea is great. It opens up for a lot of future possibilities, and I think it'd be a show worth watching if we eventually got more episodes to see the fullest extent of where it goes. However, the pilot itself does leave a bit to be desired. For one, the 4 major players in this pilot, while are all really well voice acted and have moments of absolute hilarity, I will say the constant bickering between them and exposition within this pilot can be pretty dragged on, and I could see it annoying someone who's just watching it for the first time. Like, I know a pilot needs to show off characters and explain the concept, and this has information in spades, but I also kind of want to say it's to a fault. And what I mean by that is, there's not a lot more to focus on than just the information being spewed at you with a dose of comedy. The comedy also has its issues, though. A handful of the jokes I find to go on a little long. One in particular about the head of the company, Blitz, doing sexual favors for this owl character. It had me totally lost on a first viewing. Like, I genuinely wasn't sure if the episode just jumped plot, or if this was just another chunk of exposition, only to find out at the end of the day it was just an elongated cutaway gag. Like, I was totally confused on first viewing, and that's probably not a good sign. I get there was obviously a lot of the jokes Vivzie had in mind for this, and, I mean, I can't believe I'm actually going to be saying these words, but Blitz fucking this owl person probably could have wound up being its own plot entirely. Perhaps that's just a me thing, though. At the end of the day, it's beautifully voice acted, and it damn well should be. Like, everyone at the seats of the characters are actually really good at what they do. Richard Horvitz, even, the voice for Invader Zim and Billy from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, is even a voice here. So I didn't entirely expect anything except solid acting. And the character dynamics look like they could make for a really great show later down the line, and all it just takes is some more focus. So as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of great potential here. It just needs to be tapped into. The pilot was definitely in need of a buffering. Of course, you guys aren't here for Helluva Boss, or, maybe you are. I don't know you or your life story, but we're gonna move on to talk about the show of the hour, Hazbin Hotel, Vivzie's bigger passion project. So we start the pilot on a musical number, which I think is an important note to start on. It introduces the musical aspect of the show, which is recurring throughout the pilot, and I suppose would only mean to be a recurring importance as the series progresses. This also helps introduce us to the main character, Charlie. Of course, we won't know her name until a little further down the road, but this particular musical number does go on to tell us that she is a character that, and I quote, is always chasing rainbows. The lyrics within the show also kind of hint at an abusive relationship between her and her father, which, spoiler alert, doesn't get very expanded upon here. I would imagine it would in later episodes. I mean, this is a pilot after all. You don't want to throw out too much information for your audience on first going, but it is something to take note of here. And I guess while we're here, I can talk about my opinions of the song itself that we start on, since this is a musical, and what kind of amateur critic would I be if I didn't at least try to briefly talk about the music played within a genre that heavily relies on its pieces? Well, as I said, in a narrative sense, it does its job well enough. We get the idea of everything out of the way early and cement the premise so that we know what we're dealing with and a little bit of why, too. I think Thomas Ryan did a good job on the arrangement. Elsie Lovelock was able to perform it well enough, but I'd be lying if I said that this was my favorite of the pieces within the entire pilot. Not that it's bad, it's just tonally, I don't think this was the best way to go about it. It is a very somber song, and I don't think there could have been a better way to deliver the song itself, but it's the song itself that I don't think really tonally works with what's going on. It's a bit hard to explain, but please hear me out. So what's going on during this musical number is something called the cleanse. We learn a little bit later on that this cleanse happens every year and kills hundreds of thousands of demons during it. It does seem like a sad moment for the likes of Charlie, so a somber song like this wouldn't be entirely out of the picture. But that becomes visually the focus of I'm Always Chasing Rainbows, when the lyrics itself are focusing on Charlie, the character, and her backstory and desires. I suppose one could make the argument that with this focus we get a better idea as to why Charlie wants to open up this happy hotel, as she calls it. By the way, in case you didn't know, that's the plot. As it shows that because Charlie finds this to be such a devastating event every year, that this pushes that drive to reach those rainbows. And, that would be a fair argument to make if that's how you interpret it. It's just, to me, I didn't see that. Instead, what I saw was a bit of a weird focus that doesn't entirely match up to what we're being introduced to. To me, while it's a fine method of storytelling, I think it could have been better executed. But at the end of the day, though, the song is fine. There's not much more to say on the matter. We then get introduced to Angel Dust, saying goodbye to a client of sorts before getting some drugs and having them stolen. And during this scene, we get some introduction to the kind of humor and writing that Dibsy wants to go at. And to say the least, it's, not for everyone, to put it in the best terms. Like, I don't mind it. I actually found quite a few jokes throughout the pilot to be really, really funny. But I will say if you're not too into more offensive or dark humor, this show writing may not be for you, as they do use some dialogue throughout that may come across as not quite politically correct. Terms like drag show and faggot come to mind as stuff that gets said throughout the episode, and within the current atmosphere surrounding humor like that, I could understand someone maybe not enjoying things like this. It is a very problematic show, as it were. However, if I could play devil's advocacy, the show's setting does take place in hell. Like, biblically, it's a place where the sinners go. The setting makes this writing make sense. So most of the people in hell are considered bad people. So writing that offends, comes off as maybe a little bigoted and immature, and makes you hate the characters as people, I would believe is the point. Considering what does come later, it really does all just tie itself together at the end of the day, so... Do I go on too many, political tirades in my reviews? I feel like when you really look at my reviews, I feel like I get a little preachy sometimes. I don't mean to do that, guys, I promise. With that said, I'd also like to point out the specific opening jokes, as once again, these play a role in introducing the character of Angel Dust to the audience, specifically his drug addiction and how he works as a sex worker. We also get somewhat of an idea that Angel Dust looks very feminine to people in hell. I guess. I mean, personally, I don't see it, but considering most of the characters treat him like a lady, so be it. This, I assume, does play a lot into his character at the end of the day. This also shows us a bit more of this cleanse, as it were, as within 3 minutes we get 3 characters dying more or less on screen. Now, some people might see this as reusing the same joke or something, because it is 3 instances of slapstick back to back to back. However, considering the circumstances and context to the situation at hand, these instances of slapstick do have a purpose to them, which is interesting to see in a narrative. I mean, not like it's new, Tom and Jerry did that for years, but it's not something you see terribly often nowadays. We then get introduced to Sir Pinchus, played by Stamper, and his lackeys. And again, we have something that I both like and don't know how I feel about, because Pinchus hams up the scenery. He's absolutely having fun with his character, and it's great seeing him on screen, but his egg minions, I'm a little bit weird about, because they can kind of be described as funny voice kind of makes the joke. I know technically we also have the fact that they are the weird kinds of minions who want to be stepped on by their master. I'm definitely not dense to that aspect of their joke. But vocally, the voice kind of just feels sloppy. Like, it's hard to exactly pin why. Maybe it's just the sluggish and exhaustive sounding way they say every word. But something about it just feels off to me. I guess I don't hate it, I guess. But I'm not nearly as big of a fan of them as I am Pinchus himself. We also get introduced to Cherry Bomb, which I can explain in the phrase, I don't know anything about her yet, nor do I really care that much at the end of the day. This is followed by a new scene with two anchors, Katie and Tom, who are an absolute riot with the chemistry between them, but only really show up for this one scene, so I won't go too much in detail with them. They're not really all that important at the end of the day, just some really, really great comic relief. Quick side note, I love the little details in some of these scenes, such as the news ticker here. If you actually stop to read it, it's really funny, actually. But with all of these introductions out of the way, we now get to meet our main protagonist, Charlie, talking to another character, Vaggie, and immediately we get a good idea of who the characters are and what they're about. Well, mostly. We know Charlie is a very eccentric kind of gal who loves to sing and, as explained before, wants the denizens of hell to go up to heaven. And we know Vaggie cares about her, but we don't really know that much more about her, and unfortunately this pattern stays pretty level for the rest of the pilot. Don't get me wrong, as I said, a pilot is supposed to introduce you to the characters of the show out of the gate so you have something to grip onto. To think that all of these characters being introduced to us is throwing characters into our face too quickly misses the point. But outside of Charlie and Angel Dust, we don't really know that much about each character that we're given. We know a little bit, like Pinchus is over the top and crazy, Cherry Bomb is psychotic, and if I have to reach, Vaggie does seem to have like a short-tempered voice of reason to Charlie's whimsical nature, despite how overshadowed she seems to be half the time. I don't know, perhaps it's just something to expand upon, presuming he gets picked up. So it's not really that big of a deal, it's just something to take note that we don't really know that much about each character outside of like a couple. Anyway, Charlie gets called up to talk about her passion project, the Happy Hotel, which is done in song, and it's definitely my favorite of the 3 songs within the pilot. Mostly because it's catchy, admittedly, but it's not a terrible song on its own either, like from a narrative or a musical standpoint. Well, at least I don't think so, though again, I'm not necessarily an expert on this topic. I think it just sounds good, matches the tone of the context to what's being said, matches with her character as she seemed eager to sing earlier on. It's not out of nowhere or anything, it's just overall, it's a song that fits like a glove. Of course, everyone else laughs at it all, which causes Charlie to fight back, to no avail when she brings up how Angel Dust has been staying at the Happy Hotel, when it was confirmed that Angel Dust relapsed into his own ways whilst fighting a gang war. After a few chuckles from me, we get a conversation between Angel Dust, Charlie, and Vaggie, where, well, Vaggie kind of fucking loses it. However, I do want to focus on a piece of this conversation that unfortunately hurts the writing in a way that Vivzy obviously overlooked, and I don't know who all picked up on this.
I'm gonna kill him, Doodletones. Wait! Would that make me double dead? Where exactly do I go? To double hell? Sorry, you're stuck with me, bitch.
Vivzy, not to be rude or anything, but did you forget the premise of your entire plot? Like, Charlie wants to open up this Happy Hotel after a cleanse that took the denizens of hell away. This is something seemingly everyone in hell knows about, but this question that Angel Dust brings to the table is confusing. Like, is he trying to imply dying in hell is meaningless? Then why would Charlie worry about the cleanse every year? Why even have the cleanse at all if people just come back to hell after they die? We even see someone at the beginning of the pilot taking over a company by killing the co-owner, so what becomes the point? Unless Angel Dust doesn't know about the cleanse every year, he does later talk about how he doesn't get into politics. But then, Why worry about these turf wars to begin with? Wouldn't the individual that you kill just come back to fight for their old territory? Wouldn't that very genocide that you and Cherry Bomb went on, be immediately nullified? This line sparks up a bunch of unanswered questions that didn't even need to be asked. It's all just really unfortunate at the end of the day. Anyway, they arrive back at the hotel and Charlie calls her mother. And here you can kind of get a better, a little bit more elaborated idea of Charlie's connection with her family. And of course, as I stated before, between her and her father, it seems to be a very toxic relationship. And the call leaves Charlie in a very demotivated state until he arrives. Alistair is a very interestingly designed character with kind of a neat gimmick to him. I mean, I'm a sucker for characters who speak in a more old-timey fashion just in general, but overall, the character that we are given from him is definitely charming and a standout amongst the rest of the crowd we've seen thus far. His one and only motive is chaos, pure unadulterated entertainment for him. And it definitely makes me want more of this character, because while we've seen villains who just do what they do because fuck it, not only are they a dying breed, but they're also not actively ever helping the protagonist do something good, because, they're typically villains. So Alistair is filling a role I can't say that I've ever seen before, but that's definitely refreshing to see such a different spin on things that I don't hear nearly enough people talk about. He agrees to help at the hotel, regardless of the fact that he doesn't really agree with the purpose or believes in the possible success, introduces us to a few characters we don't really get a chance to fully meet, has a song number that is interrupted by pinches, and then that's it. That's the pilot. Oh yeah, we also get this.
And what can you do, my effeminate fellow? I can suck your dick. Ha! No.
Overall, the two pilots hold, I think, personally, a lot of promise. Helluva Boss seems like it could be a fun episodic show that doesn't really have much to worry about going in, and all that's really needed to be changed is the pacing of the cutaways if Vivzy continues to want them in the show. Though I personally think with an 11-minute runtime, cutaway gags are more of a detriment if nothing else, but I guess they can work if they're shorter than the ones that we got in the pilot. And Hazbin is definitely a more interesting show altogether. There's more of a potential for an ongoing story, and it definitely shows overall more promise in the writing and character departments. I don't really have anything except slight nitpicks with it, and of course one overall instance of writing that Vivzy obviously lapsed in. But hey, at the end of the day, I say go support the shows by giving them some views if you haven't already. They're good pilots even discounting their flaws. Also, fucking success! I managed to get something out this year on this channel that's not just some half-assed Disney-related review in a sad attempt to keep this channel and my October tradition alive. Let's just hope I can keep this up, maybe. I do have that Powerpuff Girls review on the back burner. And that Gumball review. And I guess I could always re-review some older stuff I looked at with a fresher coat of paint. We'll see where this goes. See you next time. Take care.